Hi, my name is Tony Morrow, and this is Introduction to Project Management. In our last episode, we completed the initiating process group, so now let's take stock of where we are in the life cycle of our project. With initiating done, because we know about having to come back and identify stakeholders, we have in hand some references. Documents such as the business case and supporting docs, the project charter, the authority to apply resources to the project, stakeholder registry with a list of our stakeholders and their relationship to the project, Fs and OPAs. The bun has been buttered, and it's time for the meat of this burger that we call the planning process. The first step of developing the project management plan. The PMBOK defines this as the process of defining, preparing, and coordinating all plan components and consolidating them into an integrated project management plan. What does that mean? Look down the columns of the planning process group in your reference guide. It means that we are going to define and prepare each component. The knowledge areas on the left: scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communications, risk management, procurement, and managing our stakeholders. So buckle up, we are in for a ride, and it starts with scope. Scope is defined as the sum of the products, services, and results to be provided as a project. We need to plan for this in our project. Plan scope management is the process of creating a scope management plan that documents how project and project scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. Remember that Pulse of the Profession paper from episode 2? Over half of projects failed in meeting their scope. So gathering this piece early is an important piece for the success of our project. Hey John, do you think the Basilica de la Sagrada Familia in Barcelona is within scope? I mean, over 142 years and still not complete? I'm gonna guess no. So what are we gonna need to do this? We need to collect our requirements, and that's a process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs and the requirements to meet project objectives. We have to define our scope, the process of developing a detailed description of the product and project. We have to create a work breakdown structure, but more on that in a minute. And in order to collect our requirements, we'll need some things, more inputs. Our documents, such as our business case, which helps us identify the needs we are satisfying or the new state that we're trying to reach. Our stakeholder registry is what helps us understand who we need to satisfy: clients, partners, sponsors, and so on. Do we have agreements in place? Can we get the resources we need? And of course, our good friends, the Fs and OPAs. Let's use an example to map this out. If you were having to buy a new car, what would that process look like? In my case, my vehicle had that ticking engine, and I found out that the engine's a goner and the car is a write-off, and my reliable transportation needs replacing. Business case. My family needs reliable transportation to and from grocery stores, soccer fields, and for my wife and I to go to work. My wife and I discuss it and agree on a rough budget, and I'm tasked to go out shopping for a new car. In the charter, we identified our high-level requirements. In this case, it's reliable transportation for the family. The key stakeholders being the family, and we decided we both have to okay the purchase, hence our approval authority. Our stakeholder register has mom and dad as high influence and high impact stakeholders, 2 kids who are high impact, low influence, and the dog who is medium impact and 0 influence. As for agreements, as a military veteran, I get a discount at my local dealership. The Fs are that it's springtime and last year's cars are taking up space on the lot, so the dealer is motivated to sell them. And the bank lending rates are low, so financing a vehicle is more affordable. My brother is a mechanic, and he has given me a list rating all the vehicles on the lot. For this example, let's consider this an OPA, as my brother is part of my family organization. So what are my requirements? Reliable transportation. That's a high-level requirement, and more detailed, low cost to operate, dependable reputation. It needs to seat 4 and 1 dog, my high-level stakeholder requirements. More detailed, I need separate room for the dog, It needs to seat 4 adults and room for cargo, bags, and stuff. So my options are a truck, which has a 3-star rating due to a bad engine, seats 5, has room for the dog, but has a high cost to operate. I have a small car, which also has a 3-star rating, barely seats 4 adults with no room for cargo and certainly no room for the dog. There's a medium car, which has a 5-star rating, seats 5, room for the dog, but not separate, but has a high cost to operate. There's the minivan, which has a 5-star rating, room for 7 with separate room for the dog and low cost to operate, and the SUV, which has room for 5, separate room for the dog, but has a high cost to operate. So which one of these meets my requirements? This, my friends, is the tragic tale known to many dads. Yes, yes, yes. It's the minivan, unfortunately. This process can be repeated in your work environment with requirements to accommodate technical constraints and criteria. After all, an Apple operating system wouldn't work well on a PC. What's that? Oh, we're not in the 1980s. I've just been informed by my tech-savvy colleagues that that was a terrible example. I'll use examples of government programs that need to support, for example, certain communities or numbers of citizens. Infrastructure projects like bridges and roads that need to support certain volumes of traffic, or caffeinated beverages that need to be hot enough and strong enough to get us through to the end of this video. After you've finished brainstorming, surveying, and tapping into that talent pool of expert judgment, you'll have your list of requirements. If it helps, break them down so you can better understand their importance. Business requirements can be framed strategically and serve as a North Star for the project. Stakeholder requirements can be tied to various stakeholder groups and especially important when discussing clients or those that we serve. Solution requirements that are the specific functional or behavioral qualities that the product needs to have. What criteria does the project need to meet? Milestones, constraints, or contractual obligations. Quality requirements. What validations or certifications need to be met? And there are potentially many more. You can track these using a traceability matrix, a table where you can list your requirements and indicate where they come from and the deliverables that are associated with them. For defining scope, we'll need our project charter, the scope management plan, which tells us how we're going to do this, and the requirements we just identified in our Fs and OPAs. With this in hand, we'll tap into our expert judgment, any data or analytics, or ways to evaluate our requirements, and we'll use our team and leadership skills to lead facilitation sessions and engage stakeholders for their input, and lastly, product analysis. This takes our high-level requirements and dials them down to a level of detail of design of the final product. This could include technical specs, engineering requirements, capabilities, or constraints. The last step in defining scope is the crafting of the scope statement, a description of the project scope, major deliverables, assumptions, and constraints. When Gandalf slammed down his staff on the bridge of Khazad-dûm and stated, "Thou shalt not pass," how'd it do? He was making a scope statement, but he could have done a little better. Gandalf gave us an overall description of what he would do in preventing the Balrog, or the scary monster, from crossing the bridge. But we need more detail. What were his deliverables? The safe passage of Frodo and the Fellowship. What was the justification? The Fellowship needed to safely get out of the mines and return the One Ring to Mount Doom. Constraints. If the scary monster gets past Gandalf, no one else could stop it. Assumptions. There is only one bridge and one way to reach Frodo. If stopped at the bridge, Frodo and the Fellowship will be safe from the monster. Inclusions or exclusions. This, of course, has nothing to do and does not include the giant army of orcs chasing them or anything after the bridge. It does include the Balrog and any of its weapons or powers. So perhaps a better scope statement would have been I, Gandalf, shall not allow this Balrog to be permitted to cross the bridge, thereby allowing the safe passage and return of Frodo Baggins and the Fellowship of the Ring in order for them to continue on their quest to return the One Ring to the fires of Mount Doom. This assumes that I, Gandalf, am the only one who can stop this Balrog, and that this is the only bridge or way for the Balrog to cross. This excludes any involvement of the orcs currently chasing us, but does include all the assets the Balrog brings to the fight. If that is our scope statement, then Gandalf, you are in scope, and your project is a success. Finally, we can address the Shelob in the episode.
Enough with the Lord of the Ring references.
Okay, I got it, right? Work breakdown structure, or WBS, is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of work to be carried out by the project team to accomplish the project objectives and create the required deliverables. To think of this visually, it has a starting point of the beginning of the project, and then is broken down into deliverables, and then broken down into the processes that create those deliverables. The processes can be broken down even further into specific work or tasks that make up these processes. Visually, these can be a top-down pyramid broken into phases or stages of the project, or even like a mind map or spider web. What works best is up to you and your expert judgment, but you'll need some things. You'll need your scope management plan, your scope statement, which is what we just did, and a list of requirements. Oh, and of course, your Fs and OPAs. Your OPAs may even include a WBS template that you can use for your project, and if you're working with a PMO, they may have several examples. If I wanted to make a cup of coffee and my scope statement was brew a minimum 20-ounce cup of blonde roast coffee from Starbucks to keep me mentally alert in the morning, then my WBS could be as simple as a box or a bubble with a 20-ounce cup of coffee as the deliverable. It can be broken down into grind, brew, and serve boxes. Grind would have to measure the coffee beans, grind the coffee beans, and measure grounds into a filter. Brew would be fill the water reservoir, press the brew button, and wait 10 minutes. Serve means preparing the 20-ounce cup, pouring 20 ounces of coffee into that cup, and that would be a very simplistic example of a WBS. The last step of this lesson is to recognize the outputs of this stage. Project scope statement, WBS, work package, which is the lowest level of the WBS, usually with some kind of identifier. And in more complicated projects, you'll have a WBS dictionary, which provides detail on the WBS. Once you've reached this level of detail in the plan, we have achieved scope baseline, one of many baselines to come, and a good bookend for this episode. In this episode, we started the planning process and defined the project management plan. We've defined scope, plan scope management, collected requirements and categorized them, developed a scope statement, took a detour through Middle Earth, and described the work breakdown structure. We've reached our scope baseline, and in the next episode, we'll be tackling scheduling.